Walt, while you were busy covering earnings and most importantly, riding on roller coasters at Epic Universal, I did what a good analyst is. I hit the road and I went to DC to really learn firsthand what Waymo's doing in DC. And when I'm there, a bomb goes off on Thursday. Not a bomb in DC, but a bomb on Aurora's earnings call. Sterling Anderson resigned from the company's chief product officer and the board. Walt, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of great topics to get into this week in terms of Waymo and Uber and Lyft earnings. We have to address Aurora at the outset. But before we do that, I want to also apologize to our podcast listeners for the first 10 minutes of the audio quality last week. We had some compression issues that we think are going to be resolved this week. Or it's also possible Grayson was trying to cut me off because I had some great insights, I think, in that first 10 minutes of the podcast last week. I can't even remember what the topic was, but apologies, and I think that's going to get fixed.
I have to censor you from time to time, Walt. That's my job.
And for those that are considering a vacation, I will say I'll give you my quick review here. I went to the Epic's new park that is opening on May 22nd. It's a very immersive experience. The new Harry Potter ride is great, but they've got a lot of good worlds for How to Train Your Dragon and Nintendo World, and Comcast really did a great job with that Epic universe.
Did a great job, and then Walt Disney came raised from his grave, and Bob Iger pulled a rabbit out of his hat. They're going to Abu Dhabi with no money invested.
I mean, that was, from my standpoint, they were just trying. They knew that Comcast was going to have a bunch of investors checking out the new park, and for them to announce that Abu Dhabi thing and deliver earnings, not even move their earnings date, so everyone was scrambling to listen to the Disney earnings call while at Epic Universe. That's some classic corporate stuff right there that tends to happen from time to time.
It's classic corporate timing, and if you look at classic corporate timing, to me, the Sterling Anderson announcement did not seem planned. It seemed, I hate to say it, rushed.
It sent you're right, shockwaves across the industry. Everyone's like scrambling. Where is he going? What is he doing? I don't think there's an answer yet. They talk about an iconic company. Like, there's only one iconic company that I can think of. It's Apple. And is Apple, redoing its or restarting into the autonomy world? You can speculate that on that. I don't think that that's the case. And the company has, given some indications that he's not going to compete. But then if he's not going to compete at whatever his new job is, then why is he leaving the board? It doesn't, something's not adding up there.
Something's definitely not adding up. And I went on ChatGPT, iconic companies, 1, Disney, 2, Coca-Cola. I don't see either of those going, but then I got to give credit to my wife here. My wife said, he's going home. He's going to Tesla. Could that be a possibility?
I mean, if you're going to Tesla, how are you not doing that in a competitive role with what Aurora is doing? And, what's shocking to me is I'm on this earnings call. By the way, everyone's asking about this, right? Our phones have been ringing off the hook, everyone in the industry. You had how many analysts ask questions on that call? And not one analyst on that earnings call bothers to ask for more color on what's going on with this resignation. It was insane. And this is what I have to deal with, Grayson, on a daily basis with analysts on earnings call. They sit there and just kiss ass to management teams. Oh, congrats on your driver out, this, that, and the other thing, and never ask the question that matters. And what is Aurora's stock doing as a result today? It is down 5%. Because perhaps, you should have asked for some clarity on when one of the co-founders leaves the company.
Well, we should start a new section, analyst failures, or analyst fail. But this goes up there, and then I get these notes. We're all subscribed to them. They're not talking about one of the most important individuals in that company leaving. The gentleman, and this is an SEC filing, this is on video, it's not me just gossiping, he managed the Volvo relationship. He was the one who worked with Nils hand in hand at Volvo to see the VNL become to a life. So now I'm sitting here as an analyst and I'm thinking about this. Is the Volvo relationship in trouble? Because 1, they didn't launch with the Volvo. They launched with the pack car Peterbilt. There's a lot more here than meets the eye is what I'll say. And I'd like clarity.
I mean, look, I think there's even bigger and broader questions than that beyond the Volvo relationship, which obviously extremely important. You and I both had a great time with Volvo down in Texas. I think that can be a great partnership for them. The bigger issue, I think, is, Sterling, let's go back to the Bigelow battle. when Sterling had that debate with the CEO of Wabi, it showed the culture that he brought to the company that I think is much needed when you're talking about a startup company, an aggressive personality that can push the product forward. So you've had now two co-founders leave the company. The latest one, to your point, Volvo relationship, just kind of a driving force within the company. Where does that leave Aurora? And then I guess more broadly, because I always like to relate this back to our friends at Uber, like how does Uber look at this? This has been a strong partner with Uber from the beginning. And how are they viewing, this change in management team, and how will that affect their relationship and frankly, their ownership in the company?
I'm asking a lot of questions. Mr. Anderson, Sterling is not just a driving force inside of Aurora. He's a huge asset to the autonomy industry as a whole. If I'm Dara, I'm on the phone to Chris Urmson, I'm on the phone to the Aurora board. What the hell's going on? I would answer is they're north of 40% ownership stake right now. If I'm Olivia who's fantastic and runs Uber Freight for autonomy, I'm asking questions. They need answers. We need clarity. This was not planned. Despite the spin that I'm getting, in my humble opinion, this was not planned.
So that's obviously not planned based on what we read. So it was Sterling going elsewhere. So we're just gonna have to wait to see. And in the meantime, look, still congrats to Aurora for meeting that milestone. Now the next steps are things like, getting to tens of cars, doing more rides, proving that they can operate in the dark with bad rain conditions and things like that. They want to move forward. I will say that I think the confidence level on the call relative to them describing no other competition in that trucking space, I also found a little off. Given that what we know is happening at Kodiak and some of these other companies that we've been engaging with in their kind of movement towards driver out, the trucking world is certainly going to evolve dramatically, I think, over the next year or two. So hopefully that confidence in saying, hey, we're the best, and the loss of Sterling and the $1 billion that they have on the balance sheet doesn't result in a complacent company that tries to drive even faster forward in, not getting to tens of cars, but getting to hundreds, if not thousands of cars on their timeline to deliver service. Because there is a large opportunity there, but there are competitors that are gaining momentum.
By the end of the year in the SEC filing, they said they're going to get to tens of trucks. That's 10. So let's say 20, 30. That's not very many. And they do have competition in Kodiak. I need to remind our viewers and remind Aurora, Kodiak's operating driver out in the Permian Basin profitably, generating revenue. They're going through a process to go public. So the question is, Don Burnett talked about this on the investor outlook for Kodiak going public. The metric is revenue per mile. When are we going to see that metric? Aurora came out and said we've driven 4,000 fully autonomous miles, but we don't have a revenue metric for that. When does Don Burnett's metric become the de facto metric?
Well, that would require an analyst on the earnings call actually asking for that information, rather than just kissing their ass about the driver out that they accomplished a week ago.
But this is why I was very disappointed. They didn't call the great Walter Piecyk was denied a question. Why the hell do you think that happened?
I have no idea, Grayson. It's fine. They can choose. What's the saying? You can run, but you can't hide. We have our questions lined up, and we do have plenty of methods that we use to get answers to our questions.
Walt's got a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. We hope for the market's sake, we will get clarity. And I'd like to see clarity on where they're going from a business model perspective. Right now, they're ramping up an in-house fleet. 26, 27, they're going to go to licensing. I'd like to see some more clarity there. And I'd like to see clarity around the OEM partners. That's something that we need to see.
Yeah, there was no question about Toyota. I mean, I don't think there's anything changed in that relationship. Obviously, they're going to be focused on the opportunity that they have on trucking. But again, no update on the Toyota relationship, which seems timely given that Waymo just did a new deal with Toyota. Talk about where do all these different partners that Toyota is developing fit in, and is the Aurora driver still something that we should expect over time, in a Toyota Sienna, which was the original goal there.
We don't know. What we do know, Toyota's making a variety of bets, and what we also do know, Waymo's ramping up. They announced a 239,000 square foot facility in Mesa, Arizona, with Magna to produce the vehicles. The most impressive part of that, Walt, 30 minutes after the vehicles hit the factory, they go into service. That's an impressive ability to scale.
Yeah, and I have to acknowledge, I think, being wrong to a certain extent, because I think in recent podcasts, I've really, I don't want to say attacked, but I think criticized Waymo for their lack of supply and that limiting their ability and providing competitors to catch up with them. So I thought that the max was like 2,000 cars. Yes, we had seen pictures on Reddit suggesting more. It seems like it's 3,500 cars. I also think, Grayson, though, it's a little odd to boast on social media about this big Mesa factory that's still doing something very expensive, which is buy an expensive Jaguar and put your expensive aftermarket refitting of your sensors onto this car, as opposed to focus on what should be next, the integration with Hyundai, especially given you've got some risks on Zeekr, which are, we have documented well in terms of driving costs down. And I still don't think that just because they have 3,500 cars, which again was 1,500 more than I thought, or let's say 1,000 more than I thought, and it, is maybe a bridge to getting to Hyundai, I still think they need to add an additional OEM, for integration or to source the growth that they're trying to accomplish, with the robotaxi fleet.
They are. And they have a potential partner. This week, we had an announcement out of Japan. Foxconn's in the automotive industry. They're going to start manufacturing, designing, and building for Mitsubishi for the Australian and New Zealand markets. So Foxconn builds the iPhone, they can build an AV. That could potentially be there. But I sit here and I think about this. If I'm Hyundai, where am I? Am I the odd man out? Where do I sit in this whole equation?
I mean, to me, the social media posts and talking about the 3,500 cars is probably a reaction to the pressure that they're feeling in the market. They know Elon's coming, in a couple of months in Austin, although there's plenty of people in the autonomy industry that still are skeptical about what he can truly accomplish and what will actually be delivered in Austin. It's claiming that the rides are going to be very slow and they're always going to get stuck. We'll see. There's clearly incremental pressure on Waymo. I think that's why they put out those tweets. I don't think, it means anything to Hyundai. And what is Hyundai going to do? All they're going to do is deliver their cars. And I think Waymo will want to utilize those cars as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and then I also think if you look at Hyundai's Genesis brand, do they try and revive what's left emotional and start putting it in the Genesis brands to hedge their bet? They're going to have to do something.
I mean, the other issue for Waymo is, how many incremental cars are they going to need to launch new markets and to expand even to the highways? We've talked a lot about the highways and seeing seeing some indications that highway is close. But if you think about how like San Francisco works and the number of cars you need just to serve people within San Francisco, in past podcasts, I've talked about, well, maybe it's just the highway to connect, the island of coverage that Waymo has further down in the valley. If you do that, you risk sending a bunch of cars that will then shortchange your supply that's in San Francisco. So I think that take I had last week or the week before was just off. And what they're really going to need to do before they can truly open up highways to that extent is double, triple, maybe even quadruple the amount of cars that they have in a given market. Now, there's one exception. Maybe within LA, within the coverage area, if you want to get from point A to point B quicker, take a 40-minute trip down to 20 minutes, they start to light up highways there. Or whatever that road is around by the Embarcadero, maybe you open that up initially. But in terms of truly opening up highways and airports, I think it goes right back to the first thing, which is, do they have enough cars in the market to enable that? And that might be the gating factor in terms of the highways, not whether the functionality works or not.
I think you're right. Because then look, all this deadhead time, all this downtime, if we have a public number now, by the end of next year, there'll be 3,500 vehicles. I don't see how, based on what you're saying, you're going to be able to operate highways with only 3,500 vehicles unless you massively condense the markets. But if you look at all the public statements made by Sundar and the Alphabet team, there's a lot more markets coming online this year and next year.
Right. It's just math. And we got the update from Uber that in Austin, again, something that we still believe was 35 cars at the launch. They've already ramped up to 100. In Austin, they want to get up to a couple of hundred. And I think, what's the market after Austin? Is it
Atlanta?
Atlanta, right? Same thing, that they're going to want to get to a couple of hundred there. And then in San Francisco and LA, you're still expanding the fleet size. If they open up San Francisco airport, maybe they can do that and still not have to quadruple or triple the size. You're still talking about hundreds and hundreds of cars where they already have, 2,000 or so nearly deployed. Like, it doesn't leave a lot of additional cars for markets or added functionality.
Right now, the latest number we have, that Alphabet has confirmed, there's 1,500 Waymo vehicles currently on the roads globally. In Austin, we know there's 100, and the statement from DAR was that they're going to, in the coming months, going to go to 100. So let's say, be generous, say 300. Atlanta's 300. That's 600 cars right there. You cannot go on the highway. Your theory is right.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll see what happens. But those are the issues that I think Waymo is facing. Speaking of new markets, let's go back to the very first thing that you said when we got on the call. You were in D.C. doing some field work. Tell me about what you saw in D.C.
It's amazing what you can learn in D.C. when you wear an Autonomy shirt and you take a child with you. Everybody wants to talk to you. So lo and behold, my family, we're having dinner in Georgetown. I got to give a shout out. Oldest restaurant in D.C., Martin's Tavern. Really great. Lo and behold, there's a booth. There's a Nixon booth where we sat at, and the waiter was really funny. He said, if you don't order the meatloaf, this booth's going to shake, because apparently that's what President Nixon ordered. So I was a good citizen. I ordered the meatloaf. And then the booth behind us is where JFK proposed to Jackie Bouvier before she came commonly known as Jackie O and eventually the First Lady. So I'm looking out the window. Waymo after Waymo after Waymo goes by Martin's Tavern. So what do I do in doing good field work, Walt? I grab my daughter, I grab my camera, and we go chase Waymos. And so we found the Waymo there in Georgetown. And I was like, oh, is this thing broken down? The trunk was open. So I went up there and started talking to the gentleman. I learned everything. It's fascinating what you can learn when you talk to safety drivers here, Walt. I learned that the fleet size is currently 5 to 10 vehicles operating. Furthermore, the gentleman told me that a majority of the safety drivers do not like to drive and test in Georgetown because of the small, tiny roads. Interesting here, Waymo is only currently testing and mapping between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. The vehicles came from the Magna factory, Arizona plates on them. They do not have a physical depot yet. They're using a parking lot in Union Market. And then about 4 miles away up in the Brightwood neighborhood, they're charging at a Walmart Supercenter on Electrify America, a Safeway using EV Go. So that's what I learned from Waymo. Very interesting. So I take that intelligence, and as a good connoisseur and as a good economic development tourist, I go out to dinner. And I start talking to individuals in the hospitality industry. Walt is very, very bullish for this technology because they believe that it's going to drive the check size up because it's going to sell more alcohol. Because it's not the debate, do I drive and not drink? Or do I take a gamble and decide if I'm going to get a good Uber or bad Uber? Very good intel on the ground. That's what I learned.
It's hard for me to believe, because I go to D.C., as you know, at least once a quarter, that our good friends in the Capitol can drink more martinis than they already do over lunch, over cocktails, and then later in the evening. But I'm glad to see that maybe they will be driving a bit more safely. That's great. G2. So every one of these cars that you saw had a safety driver in them, presumably, right? They're just doing the mapping in the moment.
No, I want to have a clarification on that. There are rumors going around that they're mapping only. I can confirm that is factually incorrect. They are testing and mapping. So it's both.
Got it. And did you see Secretary Duffy when you were there? Did he go flying by in a Waymo while you were having a martini with your daughter?
The secretary was actually home in Wisconsin. So I did not see the secretary.
Well, I've been very impressed with what he's kind of a driving force with in the worlds of satellites and air traffic control. So I think it's notable to pause on that for a moment because, you learn a lot about someone, I guess, in their first 100 days. And, whether they're going to be, let's call it a driving force or maybe a sit back, do nothing secretary. So, for our longtime podcast listeners, I'm against his aggression against our congestion pricing in New York. But he certainly wants to get stuff done, has the ear of the president, understands why investment, in this case that I'm talking about in air traffic control systems, is good for our economy, can help workers, not displace workers. So I think these are all good signs, good early signs on what we can expect from at least that member of our government to try and drive force on autonomy. I'm just curious if you have any refreshed thoughts on that, having been in our nation's capital.
Secretary Duffy is the perfect individual to be Secretary of Transportation. He deeply cares. He's polished. He is spot on delivering a message, and he's extremely pro innovation. And he's surrounded by a great team and Deputy Secretary Bradbury and all the individuals that support them. And then soon, pending Senate confirmation, he'll be supported by Mr. Jonathan Morrison as NHTSA administrator. So, a really good team of individuals that understand the positive economic benefits that autonomy will have on the U.S. economy.
Why don't we shift to the earnings calls that I had this week, both with Uber and with Lyft. We already talked about the fact that they have the 100 cars in Austin. The other data point that I think got people fired up, or at least caught headlines, was referencing that those vehicles are now busier than 99% of all drivers in Austin in terms of completed trips per day, with hundreds of more vehicles that are planned. So, I mean, why is this news? Like, why is it surprising to anyone that a robot will not have to go to the bathroom and take a break, and will be there all day and not have to rest and be utilized to that extent? I mean, is the knowledge of what autonomy is going to do for our economy and change the rideshare business that kind of stunted that this should have been that big of a surprise?
Individuals outside of autonomy and individuals that follow markets really don't have a clear understanding of this impact this technology is going to have. To me, looking at this, Uber is putting a stake in the ground saying we're tripling down on autonomy. That's what this says to me. They have 18 AV partnerships to date. There's probably more coming at the way they're going. To me, it's a clear indication that Uber's doubling down and saying, we're shifting to an autonomy first company because, boy, oh boy, our mutual friend Harry Campbell, you go on the rideshare stuff. The feedback and the outrage from drivers about that comment, wowzerville. It was pretty intense.
So, and what's the reaction going to be? I mean, because it's coming for you. So did you not know as a driver that this is how it's going to work?
They're pissed at the end of the day. And when we listen to the Lyft earnings call, we notice how Risher kind of danced around the driver autonomy stuff. So does Lyft try and say we're the home for drivers, or Uber says, no, we're going to go to the future and build a big profitable business? You might have an interesting divide that's going to emerge in the TNC market here.
I think shifting to Lyft, it was even kind of more curious than that, because they have the earnings call, and then there's an additional call that they do with sell side analysts, and he was asked more directly about Waymo and autonomy. And for a company that felt like they were close to a relationship with Waymo, and something that I've predicted, the tone there changed dramatically. And now I'm a bit concerned about where Lyft is in this kind of Waymo relationship. It doesn't seem logical that they would be kind of boxed out of that relationship, but the tone just felt different. So, and I'm wondering also, even if, there was an opportunity to do it, like Waymo is not really incentivized, as we spent a lot of time previously talking about. Waymo just doesn't have enough vehicles to add additional markets. So the opportunity to partner with Lyft on additional markets is limited just because they don't have the cars to add those additional markets. But I'm sensing that maybe there might be something deeper in their ability to get a deal done. What do you think it possibly could be?
I'll say it gently. I think somebody got over their skis, and Waymo didn't like perhaps a public statement, which we've seen with other companies, because you notice the minute that the Risher was asked the question about Waymo on the earnings call, he immediately pivoted into a long thing about Mobileye and how they're the world's best partner.
It was very curious. I also was surprised. They got a question about insurance costs and, the overall, how to get them down. Like, how do you not talk about a shift to fleets? How do you not, at that point, focus on flex drive and how getting fleets, whether it's with existing human drivers, then ultimately to autonomous drivers, can reduce the cost of your insurance, and then ultimately, obviously, with autonomy, with your labor costs. It seemed like a lost opportunity. And frankly, getting back to my, frustration with listening to other analysts make questions in the call, I went through 2 calls. No one asked about flex drive. And flex drive might be one of those ways that Lyft can, establish a closer relationship with Waymo. Why shouldn't flex drive be one of the new market, service component of what Waymo is trying to accomplish, and that be your way to tighten those relationships. Odd that it wasn't asked on the call, but again, my frustration with the types of questions that get asked on these calls.
I feel the majority of the analysts outside yourself have no idea a true sense of what the autonomy markets are. They go on Bloomberg and they go on CNBC and rant and rave about, you call it their book, and they don't really have a clear understanding of the industry, because the flex drive thing's important. Because in Austin and Atlanta, AVOMO, I'm going to spell it AVOMO, that's who's managing the Waymo fleet for Uber. Uber's a partner with them. And then in Miami with the Waymo One, it's going to be Move. In other markets, it will be Move. And your Lyft, you sit here, Flex Drive's a wholly owned subsidiary. You should start asking questions. Are you going to ramp this up? Are you going to let other non-Lyft people use it? You need to get answers on that.
Absolutely. Let's switch back to Uber for a second as well. Off of earnings, put $100 million. The company put $100 billion. Uber put $100 million into WeRide. We've talked about WeRide on this podcast before, and some of the questions that I had about, how they're using remote drivers in China and what that ratio is of drivers to actually autonomous WeRide cars in China. I had some opportunity to have a discussion with Pony AI. Obviously, very bullish about themselves, love their competitive view towards the competition, whether that be WeRide or Tesla or others. But Uber sticks another $100 million into WeRide. And I think, you look at it and none of us really know which one is going to be the true winner here. So I think Uber it's like I don't want to say spray and pray, but it's like, okay, use money to make sure that there's fragmentation, develop relationships with those companies before other companies can. Maybe that's helping Uber have a better relationship, frankly, with Waymo than Lyft is able to. So maybe continue to do that with other autonomous options out there. And I guess that'll continue. And I don't think this would have any negative impact on their ability to continue to partner with Pony as well.
So they have the relationship they announced with Pony, but to me, this is Uber being strategic. They see what's coming. The Chinese AV companies are moving into Europe. So Uber says, why don't we be the platform to do that before they build up their own platforms? I give Uber a lot of credit for that. And on the earnings call, did you hear Dara he must be listening to Autonomy Markets. Well, he started talking about REITs, these fleet owners emerging and putting more capacity onto the Uber network. Now that gets interesting as well.
Yeah, fleets as we've talked about on many of these episodes, an important important component of Uber's strategy, again, to lower some of those insurance costs, get some more reliability in the cars, and kind of understand where the future is, prepare for what the future is, which is autonomy, right? The future is bright, the future is autonomy. Isn't that what we say? But again, let's go back to patting you on the back, Grayson, because 15 more cities after Abu Dhabi, I think you're right, that's Europe. And this goes back to, again, predicting about, these Chinese companies developing in Europe. You were very early on that, noting they were starting up operations there. And we've seen now a string of announcements that indicating they're going down that path.
Thank you for that. The earliest sign was when we had an MOU between Luxembourg and Pony AI, and then later it was followed on with a research grant. So Europe's paying them to come in. This is not about moving cheese Belt and Road, which I'm now calling the autonomous Belt and Road. It's going way down that. So now that the Chinese have a foothold in Europe, Lyft acquired FreeNow. Hasn't closed yet, but they acquired FreeNow. Does Lyft try and deploy that playbook in Europe and try and take some of the Chinese autonomy and put on the network in Europe as well?
I think it's possible. And I think, to the extent that things aren't moving forward between Lyft and Waymo, they need to be even more aggressive. Granted, they don't have the type of capital that Uber has to throw around, but more aggressive in adding more and more partnerships on the autonomy front beyond, what they've already done. I think we're probably most excited with May Mobility and what they're doing there. And Uber's already in there with May Mobility as a close second in terms of timing.
May has the relationship both with Uber and Lyft, one of the only ones that has, if you want to call it, dual citizenship, dual platform residency. We can use those terms there. The thing I'm going to be watching for as the Uber VW relationships matures, and if they do launch, that's a big question, in 2027 in LA, do we eventually say 29, 28, see something in Germany to try and counteract this Chinese? That's going to be a really interesting move that we need to watch.
That is so far out, Grayson. 29s, 2029 is what we're talking about now. I'm focused on the near term stuff and what we can get done in 25 and 26.
I'm always focused on the near term, but I'm also looking to the future, not trying to get ahead of my skis here. Jesse Levinson, the co-founder and CTO of Zoox, did an interview with the Financial Times where he spoke about Zoox ramping up and scaling up production of the Zoox toaster mobile. Why ramp up production now when your vehicle just got recalled for getting into a crash? And you have not even launched a commercial service yet. And furthermore, there's no regulatory certainty that you can even launch the toaster with paid commercial service.
I mean, I think there's more questions about Zoox beyond that. Wasn't there some additional news that we've learned about what happened maybe a couple of months ago?
Yeah, there was the crash in Vegas, the unoccupied crash. So that's the issue. 270 vehicles got recalled with a software update, but we still don't have any insight into what caused that.
Which recall was that?
That was the April 8th one where they had the crash in Las Vegas, where they had to recall 270 the Robotaxis with a software update. And before that, they had the hard braking incident recall with a Highlander. It doesn't seem, this is your third recall if you include the glass. It doesn't seem these vehicles are ready for prime time. And yet, this is the Financial Times reporting, they are going to manufacture these vehicles themselves. They're not going to use a Magna. I still don't get what's going on.
I mean, I guess my question to you is this, Grayson. I think what we know is that there's a relatively limited area that Zoox operates in within San Francisco. Is that because, in your view, of the technology, or is it the availability of cars?
Both. Now, I want to caveat saying 5 years ago, when Tim Kentley-Clay was still there, they put me in one of the original Highlander prototypes in San Francisco, where they were the first time where they were able to make an unprotected left-hand turn. And the vehicles were working good. I don't feel that their technology is progressing as fast as it is since they fired Tim.
I mean, I don't think it can be both. I think, yes, I understand that it's both. They don't have either. But if they had the supply, but the technology is not necessarily good enough to expand geographically, then the first issue you have to do is to get the technology driver out good enough where it can operate more broadly throughout San Francisco, Las Vegas, wherever you want to pick to do that. In addition to the volumes. Beyond that, like Uber and Waymo launched with 35 cars. At this point in the company's history, and with the financial resources that Amazon has, you're telling me they can't band-aid together 35 cars to get their first market off the ground and show people in the industry some progress? Like, that's scaling to get to 35 cars to scale in a market to launch service? I don't understand what is going on at that company.
I don't either. And going back to analyst failure row, not one analyst in the last several quarters has ever asked a single question about Zoox.
I mean, I get that. Amazon's a larger company. This is a much smaller part of it. It's not Waymo. Even Waymo, relative to the size of Google and relative to the problems that Google has on search, which, by the way, were further underscored this week. Eddie Q, talked about search numbers going down, month over month. It's a company with challenges. At least this is a big thing. Zoox is just, I think the fact that no one's asking about it tells you everything you need to know about Zoox. There's nothing to necessarily talk about.
No, what we want to talk about is the launch. We're going into the summer here. Well, let's play a parlor game. Yes or no, does Zoox launch commercial service by Labor Day?
No. Sorry. If I want to be a believer. I love Amazon as a company and a lot of the different things that they do, but I've just lost a lot of confidence in, where that company is and where Zoox is in their progress. So something's got to give, man, one way or another there.
Something definitely has to give because Zoox needs to show the market progress. A company that's surprisingly showing the market progress, which we have not spoke about or covered here, is Rivian, Walt. They're getting ready for an Autonomy AI Day in the fall. And I want to quote something that the founder and CEO RJ Srin said on their Q1 2025 earnings call here for you. And I'm going to quote him here, and quote, "One of our most critical technology focus areas which customers will start to see the output of, is a Rivian autonomy platform. With the launch of our second generation platform, we entirely changed the perception stack and compute. Our R1 vehicles now have 55 megapixels of cameras and more than 200 tops of onboard interference. What do you make of that? Seems like they're going.
What I make of this is when topics become popular and management teams and boards get asked about them, they all of a sudden appear on conference calls. And this just underscores the pressure that OEMs face in terms of autonomy, and also underscores stuff that Elon has said, which is that autonomy can be a deciding factor on why people will buy the Teslas going forward. Like, it wouldn't be appearing on the conference call. They wouldn't be highlighting that, hey, we've got a game plan on this, if it didn't matter to consumers. So I think autonomy is going to matter in the purchase decision of your cars. Now, with that said, like, this is probably ADAS, right, that Rivian's doing. This is not true autonomy. And then we have to start questioning Rivian, which I don't know much about, so I might have this wrong. But are they developing this stuff internally as opposed to partnering with a company that is focused on the technology stack of autonomy? What's the story here?
They are developing in a house. Originally, it started as an ADAS stack. Now they're hinting to the market. We'll get more in the fall at the AI and Autonomy Day that they're going to build a full stack, but we don't have any clarity on that yet.
I mean, I think there's a big difference between ADAS and full autonomy. I know Wave likes to talk about, how they're going to go from this ADAS and the perception stack and full AI and all this stuff in terms of full autonomy. But it feels like you already have enough issues as it is creating EVs. You're going to add an additional complexity and hard things, which you've got a bunch of companies focused on, as opposed to just partnering separately. It almost feels like Verizon trying to do a media strategy and have people and developing stuff on their own rather than partnering with someone that is an expert in the field.
They don't have the cash to build a true autonomy program. Let's just get down to brass tacks. They don't have it. They don't sell enough vehicles. They don't have the cash flow to do it. And they're not exactly a small company. They're not exactly an early company. To me, it makes more sense to go out with a Neural or Wave and license their stack and try and really accelerate this, because over time, autonomy will become a defining factor for consumer purchase, which raises the question, what the heck is GM, Ford, and Stellantis going to do? They all shut down their programs. They have nothing.
Yeah, that is a great question. But, sometimes you shut things down and then you reignite them. So it's clearly not impacting purchase decisions today. But those things can change very quickly.
Markets change quickly. They change on the dime, or they change by the second, depending on how fast your fiber pipe is. Well, what do we need to look for in the autonomy markets over the coming week? Anything on your radar?
Yeah, finding out where Sterling Anderson is going to go. That's the number one thing on my radar. I'm also thankfully going to be spending time with some of the team from Bot Auto, with Don Burnett of Kodiak. We have a lot of conferences next week where Uber and others will be speaking. Sometimes you get more information that kind of comes out of that when they've got a longer form to discuss, what's going on in their autonomy world. So yeah, it should be, I think, another busy week, Grayson.
It will be a busy week. The kids like to play with the Where's Waldo books and the autonomy economy and the autonomy markets. We're playing a game over the coming week. Where's Sterling? The future's bright. The future's autonomous. The future is asking questions. Walt, until next week.